There are 8 FPL players that have been truly underpriced in the game. So in this video, we're going to discuss those best value players and why they should be a consideration for your game week 1 drafts. As always, if you're looking forward to today's video, make sure you drop a like and of course, smash that subscribe button for daily FPL content throughout pre-season. Enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So first up, the goalkeepers, and I believe Robert Sanchez is truly underpriced at 4.5 million. Now, coming into this season, of course, looking at the goalkeepers available, personally, I don't think spending top price on a goalkeeper is a good FPL strategy. We've seen it in years gone by that sometimes the most expensive goalkeepers don't deliver the most returns because, of course, goalkeepers are judged based on save points and bonus points, and sometimes the top keepers don't do that. But someone like Robert Sanchez coming in at 4.5 million for Chelsea, I believe, is incredible FPL value. Now, of course, we need to remember, we don't know exactly who the Chelsea number 1 is going to be with a new manager in Maresco, but the beauty of this is, also, Petrovic is coming in at 4.5 million. So, as I've mentioned here, one of the downsides of Robert Sanchez is that he could lose his place during the transfer window if they were to recruit a goalkeeper. But at the time of recording, it sounds like Maresca is pretty content with the goalkeepers available to him. So, if it isn't Robert Sanchez, then it is going to be Petrovic. But because of the technical ability of Robert Sanchez, I think he will pick up the number 1 shirt. And when we look at the fixtures coming up, yes, game week 1 isn't ideal, but there are always going to be 1 or 2 bad fixtures for goalkeepers. And I'd argue that's a fixture that he could even get a monster haul if he was to accumulate saves. Beyond this, we've got Wolves, Palace, Bournemouth, West Ham, Brighton. Really good long-term fixtures for Sanchez. And as I mentioned, he's £1 million cheaper than some of those really expensive options like Edison and like Raya. Now, of course, Chelsea defensively last season were not the best, and we don't really know what we're getting with a certain manager in Maresca, but I think at 4.5 million, it's very difficult to argue going for someone like Robert Sanchez, who's going to be playing for arguably a top 6 side this season, and with the run that they do have. Now, of course, there are other 4.5 million options available like Verbruggen and Flecken, but this is going to be my number 1 pick, and I wouldn't be surprised if he picks up the number 1 shirt, that his price does start to increase as we progress through the early days of the season. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, but Sanchez for me is definitely one of the most underpriced goalkeepers in the game right now. Coming into our first defender of the video, and I say defender, we got defenders here because we have got both Livramento and Lewis Hall coming in at 4.5 million for Newcastle. So I am cheating a little bit because I have 2 options here, but I think one of these 2 is going to emerge as an FPL option breakthrough pick. I really do. Dan Burn and Trippier playing as fullbacks last season, I believe, limited Newcastle as a general team. And being a Chelsea fan, having seen both Livramento and Lewis Hall play consistently, I truly believe that both of these have the ability to play for Newcastle week in, week out, especially someone like Lewis Hall. I think that is a future England left back in the making. And I do believe in possession, both of these offer something a bit more than what both Trippier and Burn offered last season. So the fixtures are great in the opening stages. Southampton, Bournemouth, Spurs, Wolves, Fulham, Man City. So from a defensive perspective, I look at game week 1, I look at game week maybe even 4 or 5 as good options for Newcastle defenders. But the big thing about one of these 2 is, of course, they offer some attacking potential. Both of these picked up a goal last season in very, very limited minutes. I would argue that Livramento is probably on the eye, a better attacking fullback, but there's a lot more composure in someone like Lewis Hall, and I do believe from an assist perspective, he offers a little bit more to this Newcastle attack. But again, the big downside, and it is going to be an issue throughout this pre-season until we get an established understanding, is they're going to be rotation risks. If Eddie Howe does keep Dan Burn and Trippier in the squad, then of course risks and minutes are going to be a case for both of these players. But I truly believe one of these 2 will break through into the team, and maybe Eddie Howe's hand is going to be forced because they have, of course, got an injury to Botman which could go out until Christmas. So Dan Burn may move into centre-back, which could leave Lewis Hall as the starting left-back. And Lloyd Kelly, of course, has been recruited. We don't know how he is going to set up in that Newcastle team, but that is one to monitor. And I have mentioned about the price points of Burn and Botman, both of those coming in at 4.5 million. So I think regardless, we are going to see a starting 4.5 million defender at Newcastle with these brilliant fixtures. But for me, knowing what these 2 can do, I think one of these is going to break through. So you have to get these on your watch list. And if I had to take money on it, I think it could be Lewis Hall. So moving into our first midfield, and controversially, I have gone for Marcus Rashford, coming in at 7 million. Now, we need to remind ourselves that it was only a few seasons back where he came in at 6.5 million and he had a phenomenal year with 205 points in that 2022-23 season. So we do need to remind ourselves there is a player there. We just haven't seen it for about 12 months or so. But in a bad season, which we all thought it was, 0.33 XG per 90, I don't think it's terrible, especially if we are looking at him this season coming in at 7 million. If he was to produce those numbers, if not slightly better, I think this could be a really solid season for someone like Marcus Rashford. When we look at the opening fixtures, I would argue they're a little bit mixed, but equally there's some really nice ones along the way. Game week 1 against Fulham I think is great. Brighton, we don't really know what they're going to be like, but if they are open, that could be a great game for them on the counter-attack. I think Liverpool, Man United always do for some reason step up in, and Southampton and Palace and Spurs even, I think, are good attacking fixtures for these players. So Rashford coming in at 7 million, 1.5 million cheaper than Bruno Fernandes. Of course, I do believe Bruno Fernandes is probably the safer pick, and we know that we're going to get guaranteed minutes and probably consistent returns from him, but I think at 1.5 million, Rashford has the potential to be a much better value option. Now, you're probably sat there thinking, Garnacho, 6.5 million. And I do agree, Garnacho is a great pick as well at 6.5 million. But for me, when I look at a player, I just see a real upside in someone like Marcus Rashford. The big thing about it is, of course, the uncertainty. Can he actually return to the past levels? I think we all need to see something in pre-season. We need to see either a rejuvenation in Man United as a team, with Rashford being in a system that benefits him, or we just see a level up from Rashford during pre-season. I think that's going to be the big thing right now. And of course, if he doesn't actually return to the levels, you would then argue that he is a rotation risk. I don't think Ten Hag can afford to go into this season playing Rashford week in, week out when he is massively underperforming, because we're getting into that second season now and we start to question whether he can return to those levels. So the £7 million bracket is competitive with people like Eze, of course, that we need to suggest, but I think he has the potential to be the best value pick of the lot. But I totally understand that we need a positive pre-season from Man United and Rashford before we start investing there. But let me know your thoughts on Rashford in the comments. This one is a big one, I think. Next up, and probably the most talked about player right now outside of the likes of Erling Haaland, is going to be Christopher Nkunku, coming in at 6.5 million, but importantly, as a midfielder. So he's had a position change from forward to midfield, and he's had a price drop from 7.5 million to 6.5 million. Now, the big thing about this, and the reason why everybody's talking, is because Cole Palmer has had a record-breaking price rise from 5.5 million to 10.5 million, making Nkunku £4 million cheaper than Palmer. Now, I think if Nkunku come in at 8.5 million midfielder, there wouldn't be a discussion here. You just go and get Cole Palmer because he is going to be the better value pick. But this whole video is about value. And I think, to myself, could Nkunku deliver better value, 4 million cheaper than Cole Palmer? And I think the answer is yes. I think a lot of us think that Nkunku is just an injury-prone player, but it isn't the case with his history so far. He's had a bad injury at Chelsea, of course, which kicked on from France. But that's really it with Nkunku. And I do believe this is a world-class player we are seeing right now. We just haven't had the opportunity to truly see it in the Premier League. But he already picked up a couple of goals in those few minutes that he did play last year. Great long-term fixtures, which we discussed already with Robert Sanchez. Game week 1 isn't ideal. You could even bench him if your squad was good enough. But beyond that, some really solid fixtures for Nkunku, and the potential of him playing out of position as a forward. We saw it at times with Chelsea in pre-season. And again, we need to monitor pre-season under Maresca, because one of the cons that I do have here is uncertainty on position under the new management in Maresca. We don't exactly know what formation he's going to play and what the impact is on someone like Nkunku. In an ideal world, Nkunku plays off the left alongside a big man at top where he can interchange positions, but we don't know if that's definitely going to happen under Maresca, who relies very much on wide wingers. I don't think that is Nkunku's game, but I think £4 million cheaper than Cole Palmer at 6.5 million playing for a team like Chelsea, who could inevitably score goals. I think this is an amazing value pick. I'm going to put it maybe at the top of the list of picks for this season. So let me know your thoughts on Nkunku in the comments, because a lot of people are talking about him right now, and I think it's incredible value. So coming down in the prices now in the midfielders, we have got Hudson-Odoi, an ex-Chelsea player who had a fantastic end of the season. Arguably one of the reasons why Nottingham Forest actually stayed up last year with his goal contributions. You can see that with 8 goals and 2 assists. Coming in at 5.5 million this year with amazing opening fixtures, I think. Bournemouth at home, followed by Southampton and Wolves. Yes, Liverpool in game week 4 isn't ideal, but then in game week 5 and 6, I think they are really good fixtures and became a bit of a talisman in this Nottingham Forest team at the back end of last year. I know Gibbs White is the man to go for if we are investing in Nottingham Forest players, but £1 million more expensive for Gibbs White. I think Hudson-Odoi just offers a little bit more from a goal scoring perspective. I do think Gibbs White is a better value pick in terms of overall package, but if we are looking to build a team structure and maybe looking for a 5th midfielder as opposed to a 4th, I think if you can afford it, Hudson-Odoi is a really, really shrewd pickup. As I mentioned, the fixtures are great. The delivery last year was good in terms of goals. The only downside is the underlying numbers weren't incredible. 0.15 XG per 90, 0.15 expected assists per 90. So not the best, but of course we are looking at a 5.5 million midfielder here. We're not looking at the likes of Haaland at all, Mo Salah. The only thing I will say is, being a Chelsea fan, having seen Hudson-Odoi, I haven't seen it yet where I think he could deliver consistent returns. I do feel very much he is a purple patch player, but again, at 5.5 million, we're not expecting this player to deliver us a 200-point season. And as I mentioned, I think they're only going to kick on, not necessarily Nottingham Forest, but Hudson-Odoi as a player this year. And I think this is a really nice value pick at 5.5. But again, let me know your thoughts in the comments. So the final best value midfielder in this video is going to be Aston Villa's Rodgers, who's coming in as a 5 million midfielder and enjoyed a really strong end to the season. Now, it's worth noting, didn't play much last season, but anybody that actually did watch him will know that this guy is a baller. He is a straight up baller, and Unai Emery really trusted him in an important stage in the Aston Villa time last year. So I fully expect to see good minutes from Rodgers this year. 3 goals, 1 assist in 636 minutes is decent returns. Now, the thing I will say is this. I think he's a brilliant 5th midfielder bench rotation. I'm not looking at Rodgers thinking to myself, he is going to play every single week. I would only go for this pick if you have maybe 3 up top that you can rotate well with him, because I don't think you can necessarily justify his minutes week in, week out. But the fixtures are great. West Ham and Arsenal to open, not ideal, but beyond that, Leicester, Everton, Wolves, Ipswich, really, really solid fixtures. The one thing I will say is competition for places is going to be strong at Aston Villa. Yes, they've got rid of Douglas Luiz, but they have invested well with other players like Onana, for example. Rodgers, though, I think is the pick of the bunch. I can't sit here right now and say to you that he's going to definitely start in game week 1, but I would not be surprised if this guy becomes an established member of the Aston Villa team. I think it's only a matter of time. It's just whether you want to take that risk on him early doors with the knowledge you can get. Someone like a Hudson-Odoi maybe at 5.5 million, only 0.5 million more. But more than anything, I just want to make sure there's some awareness brought to Rodgers, because already scored 2 in pre-season. Unai Emery loves him. He's a talented youngster, and I think it could be a true breakout season for him this year. So moving into the best value forwards, and probably again, similar to Nkunku, the most spoken about player is going to be João Pedro, coming in at 5.5 million and remaining as a forward, because we need to remember he has played in multiple positions under De Zerbi last year, as a 10, as a forward, as a wide man. So it's really good to see him come in as a forward. And when you look at the underlying numbers of last season, you just start to question the price point of 5.5 million. 0.51 XG per 90, 0.22 expected assists per 90. So really, really solid underlying numbers. And we saw last season him actually take penalties for Brighton alongside Pascal Gross. So if he is putting up these numbers right now and potentially on penalties with, I'm going to say the fixtures are quite tough. It is one thing. Everton away is always a tough fixture. Man United, Arsenal, but then Ipswich and Nottingham Forest in game week 4 and 5. And Chelsea, we always know, could be a brilliant fixture for any forward on any given day. And again, similar to the situation with Rodgers, I think he is cheap enough that he could be a rotating bench player for you. So, for example, what you could do is maybe go for someone like a Rodgers and a João Pedro in your team and rotate the 2 of them, flicking between formations depending on the fixture that they have in front of them. But Regardless, with the new management, there is a lot of uncertainty right now with Brighton, but speaking to the fans, seeing a lot of the forums, I do think that João Pedro looks like he could be starting, especially with the injury to Evan Ferguson. I don't think they have too many options available, and under De Zerbi, he was really criminal for rotating the team regularly. Of course, we will give him credit for the European fixtures that he had to manage. With no European competition this year, a new manager fully focused on just the Premier League and an attacking manager at that. I think at 5.5 million with João Pedro, when we're looking to squeeze in Haalands, Watkins, Isaks, I think this is a no-brainer for our third forward, unless you are going for a 4.5 million bench fodder pick. I think this is a no-brainer. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, but I love what I'm seeing with a João Pedro pick. So the final player coming in on today's best value video is going to be Alexander Isak. 8.5 million. Yes, he is expensive in the context of the other players that I've showed you, but I rate Alexander Isak so highly that I think he's going to make a mockery of this price point, 8.5 million, considering he doesn't get injured or any random rotation in the wings, which I don't think anybody is necessarily expecting. So his numbers were a joke last season. 0.83 goals per 90, 0.86 expected goals per 90. So he actually undelivered. Now, let's be real, pretty much on par. But when we're looking at forwards, that is unbelievable numbers. Only the likes of Erling Haaland is anywhere near this. Darwin Núñez is in terms of XG per 90, but nowhere near in terms of actual output. So this is a phenomenal forward, clearly an elite finisher. And put on top of that, the fact he's a penalty taker for Newcastle just elevated him as a pick. Over 20 goals this season is ridiculous. And coming into this year, he has fantastic opening fixtures with Southampton, Bournemouth, Spurs. And we've seen that Alexander Isak can basically score in any fixture put in front of him. So I'm not concerned about games like Man City away or home in any point this year. The big thing I will say is this: he has had some injury concerns last season, so we need to monitor whether that is going to be a regular thing for him, because someone like an Ollie Watkins just plays every single minute regardless. And of course, we did see the Eddie Howe rotation of Callum Wilson and Alexander Isak, depending on which one was available to him. I am hoping that Callum Wilson almost gets a move this season, because it will just solidify Alexander Isak as the #1 forward, which he already is, but from a minutes perspective, because he did occasionally come off around 75, 80th minute, and we want those forwards that are going to play the full game, like a Haaland, for example. The other thing I will state is Anthony Gordon coming in at 7.5 million midfielder. One would argue that is even better value than Alexander Isak. But the big thing about Isak is I feel like he's got that real high ceiling when we're looking at players. Gordon was fantastic last year. I think he will be in most players' teams. But do you want to go for the double up is the big question. Do you want to go for Gordon and Alexander Isak? Because I think it's going to be very difficult to ignore Gordon this year at this price point. But with the fixtures coming up, I think an Isak-Gordon double-up is actually a really viable move, especially with the way we saw Newcastle attack last season. So we need to monitor pre-season. But because Haaland's coming in at 15 million, with Isak being, just over half the price of him, it is outrageous value this season. And it's going to be very hard not to have someone like Alexander Isak in your Game Week 1 teams. And let me know in the comments, is he in your current draft? Yes guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's video. I really hope it has provided some value and given you a little bit of an idea on those players that I think are going to rocket in price because of how incredibly underpriced they have been put in. If you enjoyed it, make sure to drop a like and of course smash the subscribe button, because as I mentioned, we're going to be doing daily videos here throughout pre-season, so we have a lot coming up. You don't want to miss a thing. If you have any questions, put them in the comment section. I'll be sure to answer them, and have an amazing day, and I'll see you real soon. Take care. Cheers.